Welcome to the Momentom Collective Podcast. Momentom Collective provides training spaces and community around the world for unconventional minds and nomads to co-create the future. This podcast shares the stories on how we transcend and shift our passions into sustainable ventures. Join us. On this edition of the podcast, visionary and CEO of Unconventional Life, Jules Schroeder. Get ready to jump into some big ideas coming at you. And this podcast has been brought to you by Montreal Cowork, the most human place to network and co-work in Montreal. Stop by in person or visit montrealcowork.com to find out more. Now let's jump straight into the conversation. Hello, everyone. John Early here with the Momentom Collective Podcast. And what a great podcast it will be. I'm really excited to have a good friend and a good friend of Momentom Collective as well, Jules Schroeder here on the podcast. And Jules is the CEO of Unconventional Life, a serial entrepreneur and a successful musician with a message to share with the world. And she's found her success by putting her art and passions first. So Jules, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks, Johnny, for having me. What's up, Momentum Collective? Good to be here with all of you.
Absolutely. What's good in the world of Jules this week?
Well, it's all happening. So I am moving out of my house in Boulder, Colorado, which is a home base. And I've been here, Colorado, for 11 years. I've also been to 11 countries in the last 6 months. So it's like full nomadic, trying to have a home base life. And I'm going full-time nomadic in a few days. So that's been wild. And then we also just launched our Unconventional Life Bali event, which will be teaming up close to when Momentum will be in Bali at the end of the year. And that's been wild. We're already halfway full with that. So registrations have been crazy. And then I'm performing at this big music festival next weekend as well for 10,000 people. So it's just all the things.
It's all happening.
Yeah, it's so good though. Yeah, and it's been perfect, eclipse time. And I find a lot of us, especially those that tune in, really on the cusp and verge of something, our next phase, our next expression, being born, and feels really alive for me. So.
Excellent. Well, happy full moon as well. Today is the full moon, so all the things are coming together. For those that aren't as familiar with your story, is it possible to just get a bit of a background on who Jules is?
Yeah, so I grew up in Connecticut, oldest of 5 girls. My dad worked Wall Street in New York City. He was definitely the kind of guy that you'd come to him with any amazing idea and he would literally find the holes within 10 seconds. And so I learned at a young age how to really develop this mindset. Instead of seeing things that were abundant and that were great, I'd actually see what was missing in everything. And so I learned how to think, whether it was in business or whether it was just in life, how do I find the missed opportunities? And that led to me starting my first 6-figure company at 18. And then I started my first 7-figure company at 22. Then at 24, I had a business partner embezzle a bunch of money, went into $200,000 worth of debt overnight. Got to then explore who am I without the conventional terms of success, relationships, money, savings accounts, things like that. And then had this crazy near-death experience in 2015, which ultimately launched this new version of what I'm doing, which is Unconventional Life, which essentially is this Forbes column, top-rated podcast for entrepreneurs and artists, and these live experiences company where we bring together these entrepreneurs and creatives for these masterminding events all over the world. And then I use, the idea behind Unconventional Life is how do you create and empower people to ultimately have more permission to follow their own non-traditional path. And I know Momentum Collective gets this as well. There's 1,000,001 ways to make money in the world. You no longer have to go to school, get a good job, get good grades, get a better job, and then eventually die. There's 1,000,000 ways to do it. And you also don't have to compartmentalize your talents, your gifts, your self-expression. There's a way to actually be able to weave in all of you. And so that all got launched, Unconventional Life post-near-death experience. And it's been a wild ride in my 29 years. So...
Such a few lifetimes in 2029. Put it all together. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I was fortunate to be able to experience Unconventional Life Nicaragua last year with Momentom Collective, and just an amazing event. I can't speak higher of it. And we've had you as well in Guatemala at our residency. And you truly do. You're an inspiring person. Your story, obviously, you have the context and this experience behind you as well. But I find you pay attention to people, and you kind of know, I find you're inspiring because you know these shortcuts, how to motivate someone. You can kind of skip the kind of the fluff and whatever and dive right into it. So I'm curious, what shortcuts do you find you use the most when you're helping someone step into their dream or their passion? Because you're damn good at
it. Thanks. Yeah, I love hacking what I call algorithms, or basically conventional systems of how society has deemed, or basically even conventional timelines. Like, oh, it should take you X amount of years to finally get the thing you want. And I'm like, well, what if you just go after the thing you really, really want? And I call it nonlinear reality creation is the term that I play with it. And, I think for me and for those hearing this, a lot of this started, really when I had that moment when a business partner embezzled a bunch of money. At the time I was 24, I was running a team of about 30 and was in way over my head dating my other business partner. And it was after literally having clients refund at like $30,000 each and losing all of the constructs of what I thought was important. I started to ask myself, like, who am I? What do I care about really? And ultimately this question around happiness started to emerge. And it's one practice that, even lately I revisited it on the plane back from South Africa just a few months ago at our last event, where I looked at my life and, there's this idea of being happy, right? Like, we'll be happy when we've got this gig, or when we get this paycheck, or when we take this trip. But I started to actually tell the truth to myself, like, what was my direct moment-to-moment experience of happiness? And when I looked at it, I looked at everything in my life, and I would say I was probably happy about 40% of the time. Like, I remember being in South Africa a few months ago. I'm staying in this like gorgeous beach villa, like in this super nice part of South Africa, looking at the ocean and just not having a feeling of like totally fulfilled and inspired. Yet from the outside, people would be like, oh my God, your life is so great. And look at you on Instagram and blah, blah, blah. And I think we can all relate to this. It's like people have perceptions. We even have perceptions of people. You might even be having perceptions of me right now, like hearing who I am and like, who is this girl really kind of thing. Right. And so one of the tools that I do now and that I did then is I started to look at everything I'm actually doing in my life. From the moment that I wake up in my day, from where am I actually spending my time? Where is it going? Is it going to emails? Is it going to phone calls? Is it going to training? Is it going to business stuff? And I gave it a ranking on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being like maximum what I call fuck yeah energy or maximum excitement and joy, to a 1 being like, I need to stop doing that immediately. And I found that the majority of the stuff that I was doing in my life ranked at about a 6 or a 7. And the only 3 things that gave me a 10 was when I was performing on stage, either singing or improvising. I make up full songs like on the fly, or when I'm leading events. And then the third was CrossFitting. And when I looked at where my time was going, it was only 15% of my time was actually going to the things that gave me the most joy. So I decided to scrap my life in terms of my time commitments and priorities. And even if you're hearing this and you're like, Jules, I have a, more of a conventional job. I don't exactly have the flexibility or the luxury to just like scrap everything and reorchestrate things. You can start small. And I noticed that the more time I gave myself to do the things that gave me joy, the more my moment to moment experience of happiness shifted. And ultimately, why does this matter? I found that when you're happy, I call it your vibration, or essentially who you are in the world showing up, is actually greater and more bright. Like your light has more space to shine. And I find that when I'm most in alignment with my light, the opportunities that are most aligned, like these crazy, there's no way, like, for example, that I'm playing at this music festival as of a week ago for 15,000 people, like shit like that just doesn't happen on a conventional time frame. But because of who I am and how I'm showing up in the world, it's like these mega opportunities get to come to you much faster. And I call it, whether you call it flow or whether you call it nonlinear reality creation, I find that when you are in a place of joy, resource, and abundance in yourself, that's when these more aligned things can come. And the stuff that maybe is, kind of good or pretty good that we often say yes to, these things that maybe rank at the 7 or the 8, if you're willing to let go of the 7 or 8 for a 10, I find that what ends up showing up ultimately becomes that much greater. And not as a one and done kind of thing. Like you actually build a muscle, like you're training your environment in your world to say, you know what? I only want 10 on 10s coming on over here. And all those 7 or 8s that I've been saying yes to, like, let's put those aside. So it's actually building a form of muscle memory. So that's something that started way back in the embezzlement, something I've been playing with now. And I find it's really been giving me a hack in terms of the kinds of results I'm able to get. But ultimately, like, I'm having a lot more fun in the process. And like my direct experience of being alive is also more fun. So like, that's a bonus, above anything else. Like you go to bed with you and wake up with you every single day. And I found that the best investment that you can make is really in a relationship with yourself and doubling down on that, because when it all else fades away, everything that you're going after or everything you want to be, you're really the one that's the common denominator through all of it. And so these have all been, small glimmers of pieces that I've played with in my life. So.
Absolutely. I love it. And it's interesting that you're saying like finding those moments of complete joy and excitement in the moment, because do you feel like that with conventional life, that most people are projecting their future enjoyment, and so they're always working towards that? Do you feel like that's one of the main things that's holding back individuals in society, is that future projection?
I completely agree. And it is. And, for those that even are listening to this that have more of a conventional frame, it's like, you think about it, like as soon as I'm done with work, then I can do the thing that I want to do.
Right.
Or as soon as the weekend happens, or like, okay, I'm just going to like save up enough money here. Then I'll have my side hustle going, and then I'll do this. And it is totally this conventional inherited conversation that is just like future pace, future pace, future pace. And there's nothing wrong with looking in the future. But if you look at what are the little things that are happening right now, I find that when you're in touch with present wisdom and present experience, that's ultimately what does move the needle faster rather than, the future frame we've inherited. So
for sure. Or when you realize that time is a matter of our own creation.
Totally. Nonlinear reality creation.
Exactly. Going back to the 3 things that excited you, I found that really fascinating, that the 3 things, when you're breaking it down, seem quite balanced. You had, when you're singing, so the creative, the right brain, the business side when you're doing these events, and then also the fitness, the CrossFit, so the physical stuff. So you kind of have this nice balance. Is that your ideal balance, to be able to work the left brain, right brain, and the physical as well?
Yeah, totally. And I think if I were to put them in order, like the physical stuff, the self-care piece comes like first. That's like foundational level 1. Like I've been so busy with the event. We also launched this thing called the Billionaire Society, which is like bringing together unicorn billionaires from all over the world for transformational dinners and luxury experiences. And that I'm working on a new album. So the only way that I can stay balanced, I was telling my friend, I was like, if I didn't do CrossFit, like I would be like bonkers. Like I would be like batshit crazy. Like there's just no way.
An output. You need that output of energy.
No way a normal human can do this kind of shit. Yeah. It just doesn't happen. But I find that when I get up in the morning, like I do this meditation, I go to CrossFit, I resource. I actually have a rule where I don't work usually before 12 o'clock every day. So I work for only about 5 hours, 12 to 5. And I hustle hard in those 5 hours. But like outside of that, it's really resourcing the self-care. And then I find, the willingness to actually just adapt too. Like the other day I had been going so hard and I was like, you know what? I just took the whole day off, canceled the calls, and I just literally worked on like 2 new songs. And I was like, I need to resource that way. So I think there's an attunement that becomes possible when you start to, at least when I've started to resource myself first, I can actually hear what my body is needing more, rather than you're so out of balance and out of touch that one day it all hits you. And the next thing you know, you're sick for 2 weeks, or next thing you know, you're like having a nervous breakdown, or all of the things that I've personally experienced over the years. And so I find that really has been the game changer for me.
Absolutely. And that's something that Momentom Collective is all about, is finding the importance of arts in entrepreneurship and kind of finding that how they both thrive off of each other. So it's interesting to hear you say that, you'll need a break and be like, I need to sing a song, or I need, a creative movement or something to kind of like counterbalance this. So another thing that I'm curious about, so you've got the left brain, right brain balance, you've got the artistic side, and you've also got the physical stuff. So where does spirituality fit in that balance? Do you feel like that's kind of that centerpiece for the left, right brain and the physical, or where do you find that fits?
Yeah. So I think if I were to say it, it feels like the nucleus for me. And this shifted about 3 years ago when I had this near-death experience. It was a wakeboarding accident, and full on just like remember coming out of the MRI in the hospital, and this white figure approaches me, 6 Black Shadow Council member conversation, which was, Jules, you have more work to do in the world. Do you want to do it? And just remember saying yes, as long as I don't come back as a vegetable. They thought I was paralyzed. I thought my neck would have been broken. Get zapped back into my body, feel this energy, forge my neck back together, shoot down my spine. And the moment that I woke up, like life has altered. Like life before, very much driven by me. Life since, very much coming through me. And literally what I mean by that is like a few weeks later, I get a call from the UN that's like, hey, do you want to be a global ambassador for education and appear at the UN in a few weeks? And I'm like, well, kind of in a neck brace, not really the best time. And so, like stuff started happening and I said yes. And then Forbes was like, come be a part of 30 Under 30. And they're like, host this official podcast on Forbes 30 Under 30 Unconventional Life. And then these events. And so it's really been a series of dominoes since. And for most of my life before, and for those hearing this, you don't have to literally like almost die and come back to like get this, is that I lived my life very much out of this desire to prove myself. I was always seeking. I was always like trying to validate like either that I was good enough for something or just that I could make money or that I could have these opportunities. I was just hustling hard. It was just always out, 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 out. And since then, coming back to your question, like I find now I allow things to come through and it's actually more of a receiving energy. So a lot of times what it will look like in real time is that it'll look like I'm almost not doing anything in terms of like incubating. And then I'll have a big spike and it'll be a massive activation period. I'm currently in an activation period, which is why it's so crazy right now. And then I'll go back to like incubating and then it'll be a big spike. So it could actually look like a lot of times from the outside in these incubation periods that I'm not doing anything. And then by a conventional standpoint, it's like you go to work, you do a little bit of something every day, so you accomplish something. But like this new frame of living of the created by versus the created through is you're kind of on the waiting timeline for it to come. However, when you act, it then takes you so much further than it would have had you just been going slow the whole time. And so learning this new way to be and create in the world, which I call being through, I think all of us in a lot of ways are a channel or essentially just a vessel where we have the ability to allow our gifts to flow through us and then be created outside of us. Having that as a foundation has allowed me ultimately to step into my own power more, but ultimately more of like a sense of self of like who I am and what I aim to do. And, you know, whether you call that increasing your intuition or I call it instinct as well, I find those pieces are like necessary tools that are required almost in this new model of living, being, and creating that we're seeing happening in the world today. And for me, that's been like at the nucleus, these like foundational values, and then left brain, right brain includes, like it all kind of surrounds. But I find when I'm living in this coming through or this spiritual place is how I relate to it. And for me, after that accident, like I call it God. I like had this direct experience of massive amount of love in the highest frequency that I'd ever felt, like could bring me to tears if I really felt into it again. And it's like, after having that for me, it was like, okay, this shit's real. Like there's like, this actually exists.
Else out there. Yeah.
There's something out there. I felt it. And it's really become like the overarching theme. And, you know, I actually sing in a worship band at church that has a Christian pastor, a Jewish rabbi, a touch of bolder spirituality. And they're all part of like a Muslim, whatever organization.
And everyone's drinking cacao.
And everyone's just having a great time. And I find that just doing that every week and dropping in allows me to just open up, clear more, release more to ultimately, participate left brain, right brain, and all the things in between. So
I love that. And I think that's a powerful message. And I think that's part of your power is that you're trying to facilitate that experience with people and also say, hey, you don't have to have a life and death experience to get your life on this higher frequency. Or, you know, I've done some work with a charity in Guatemala with some street kids. And the founder of that, he was one of the guys that called in to work sick and the World Trade Centers collapsed, you know? And of course, so his life changed drastically. And it's that same thing where it's like, we don't have to have these experiences to step up. And I feel like that's something that you're really trying to live up to. But do you find that sometimes intimidating? Do you feel like that's a weight when you have these profound experiences that you have to continue to step up to you know, justifying these experiences that you've had?
Yeah, I like the question. You know, I think, you know, a lot of times people just see the success side of it or they see the output and they're like, oh my gosh, like, how did you get, you know, how did you pick that, check that box when you were, you know, coming into life or something? And for me, like, I find just as much success as there's been, you know, just equal as amount of like failure and intensity. And, you know, the last few months I've been going through a huge incubation where my partner and I transitioned out of our relationship. I had 3 friends of mine randomly pass away in a freak waterfall accident. And I've just been like grieving. I've been like rocked. And like, I've been in such a pit where I haven't really wanted to be out to anyone, yet simultaneously I've been willing to be with and feel the grief. Like I've been willing to just allow it and not resist it, not like make it wrong. Yeah. I've received the grief. And then simultaneously I'm being invited to collaborate with some ridiculous Grammy nominated artists, perform on these stages, launch a company to support billionaires, launch our Bali event. So I'm kind of having like a bit of like a it's like a witnessing moment where like internally I'm like freaking grieving and I like can't want to take any phone calls. And then externally, as a result of doing the work and being willing to do the work, these changes are actually happening. I feel like it's like God's little carrot of like, come on, Jules, like here's a little gift, keep going. Here's a little performance. Just keep feeling that grief, girl. And I find that is how I've lived a lot of my life. And I think this, there is a lot of pressure sometimes. Like for me, I never feel like the work's ever done, yet at the same time, the work's always done. Like it's this dichotomy in a lot of ways. And, one thing I found is that a lot of the tapes around like, am I good enough? Are you really sure you want me to do this? Are you sure I'm qualified? This shit's crazy. Like that voice, I don't think ever goes away. So if you're hearing this and you have your own version of that, like and be with that and then still take action anyway. I can say, yes, that has room here. It's allowed here. And it's not going to change the choices that I'm making in real time. And so I find that distinction has been important, and also doing a lot of personal growth and development work and like saying yes to this has been important. But my chances are, like, I imagine for those hearing this, like there's something inside of you, like this massive gift or this massive knowing, yet externally you haven't quite seen it represented in the world. Like you probably feel something big in you, some big stuff is shifting, and you can't point to that like congruency yet in the internal and external. And I think it's happening to us like planetary wide. Like I'm seeing massive friends all over the world where we're waking up to our gifts in a new way. The outside model of conventional paradigm to new paradigm is completely shifting and changing. And so as a result to that, like our whole world is a little crazy with natural disasters and shootings and whatever. Yet as people, we're feeling this newness in us brewing. And so my only advice on how I'm working with it is just to know that you're not alone in it. It can feel deeply personal at times. And like a lot of people, including myself, including our community, are feeling it. And it's exciting and it's moving. Like we're really shifting what is possible on the planet. It's like why we're all here. And as a result of that, I find you have to literally be willing to make more space inside of yourself in order to hold more light. So you got to be willing to release stuff, even when we don't want to, even when you're not ready. I didn't like saying go to that relationship. Still madly in love with him. Yet it wasn't like in alignment. Maybe it'll come back at some point. I don't know. But I've done this enough times to know that if I want to step into where I'm going, I have to be willing to, and have a shit ton of compassion for myself and not take myself too seriously and totally like hit the floor, bawling my face off after CrossFit in the morning, if that's what needs to be called, and then still show up in the face of that anyways, and not pretend, but just allow it all to be included. And I think that's the beauty of like this new paradigm so much too, is it's this and reality. We get to be a mess. We get to have dignity. We get to have humility. We get to have glory. We get to have fun all at the same time. It doesn't have to be compartmentalized and behind the scenes of what is or isn't appropriate. And so that's at least how I play with it in my own relationship. And for those hearing it, like would encourage you to do the same, because it makes it that much more workable.
Absolutely. I think the big words there for me, especially this year, is receiving, just being able to receive and getting rid of the resistance. And even if it's receiving grief or receiving success, I feel a lot of us do feel daunted by our own success. So we almost put resistance up and be like, oh, I'm not ready for this, or I'm not good enough for this. And then it kind of, do you feel a lot of people have that block that they aren't, they want the success, but then they start getting it and they feel this resistance and they give into the resistance instead of receiving it.
Totally. So, or like intentionally like create things that sabotage it, and then they're like, I could just never get ahead. And so, and I've been guilty of that too in my own life. And I think it's such a common human experience. Yeah.
Well, that almost brings us into the topic of, reality creation and being able to step into these things to manifest this. So what do you feel are the ways that you manifest your reality? Is it through your belief structure? Is it through intention? Is it through repetition? How do you find you can tap most into, or just receiving and just being open?
Yeah. So great question. I think for me, like I have an inherent set of tools and principles that I guide and live my life by. And this started, with the simplest thing of it's either a hell yes or a no. And, people would often talk to me about intuition, and I didn't really have a direct experience of it. It actually was like, that's something for those people, and this is something for me. And chances are those hearing this probably do have some experience with intuition. And so I got curious, coming back to the yeses and nos thing, like if I could actually feel in my body like a visceral experience in my body, like an expansive feeling in my body, that would indicate a yes. And a contracted feeling would indicate a no. And for all this, people that are hearing this, you can kind of check this out in real time. There's like stuff in your life that feels instantly exciting. I call it fuck yeah energy. It's 10 out of 10. Someone's like, want to come on an all expense paid trip to Bali, and you're like, not even thinking about it. You're totally guessing. And then someone's like, do you want to come on an all expense paid trip to Bali? But you have to leave tomorrow. And then it's like a 40-hour layover. And then you might not get to eat then. And then you might actually have to pay this other thing. And then you're like, wait, hold on a second.
Little red flags popping up.
Little red flags all over the place. And then that massive expansive feeling starts to get more and more contracted. And so I relate to that in my life as part of a master toolkit that I use, which essentially is an indicator of where to follow the yes and where to pay attention or maybe pause on the no. And so for those hearing this, actually check out when you have decisions, do you feel expanded around it? And if you do, that's an indicator, keep going in that direction. Or do you feel contracted around it? That's usually an indicator to pause, step back, or maybe pivot. Now, however, the caveat to this is sometimes you can just actually feel afraid to step out of your comfort zone, and it's still exciting. And I think for those moments as well, really paying attention to just allowing yourself to feel it even longer. And then you'll get more clear on the expansive or contracted feeling. So that's one thing that I do that really helps with nonlinear reality creation. The other big hack is I believe everything we say creates our experience. I have a saying, word creates your world. So word equals world. I find most of the times we don't get what we want in our life because we simply don't talk about it. So most of the time we don't have enough money because we don't create enough opportunities for people to pay us. Or we don't have, enough great opportunities because no one in our life actually knows what we're doing. Check this out. Do your friends, do your family, does your network actually know all of what you're capable of? Chances are you're probably maybe at a 10%. And for most of you, or some of you, maybe you're not. And I find that the more I share about things in my network, the more that conversation then gets to create another reality, which then creates another reality, which creates another reality. I call it the networks of conversations. It's just if you assume that everything that exists around you, all the conversations, you're responsible for it, shifts things. Such as there's a conversation in your network that, there's never enough money, or there's a conversation that relationships are hard, or there's a conversation that, it takes a lot of time to become successful. Consider that these are all conversations and you're the origin. So if you actually started conversation sharing that, wow, it's so easy to have an abundant bank account, or wow, relationships, I could just do this with my eyes closed. Or you had a conversation that was wow, success comes so naturally to me. It's effortless to me. That through virtue of you, those people around you would then start sharing different conversations and daring conversations. So it all kind of ripples. So if I were to kind of come completely concrete on this, imagine there's an idea in a lot of you that are sitting, listening to this, that lives inside of you that no one's quite heard. I would literally just go out there and share about it, whether that's a post on Facebook, whether that's a phone call. I mean, literally, I was sitting in South Africa 2 months ago, talking to a girlfriend of mine in a safari picnic at our Unconventional Life event amongst zebras and giraffes. And we got talking, and it was I want to create more impact in the world. I don't want to go out broader. It's not millionaires. I was let's impact billionaires. And over the course of one lunch conversation, in 2 months, we've created this thing, the Billionaire Society. We have 2 dinners now scheduled for 18 billionaires in Singapore and Kuala Lumpur in September to actually bring these unicorn billions together, unicorn billionaires that actually want to make impact in the world. And now we're doing this experience at the end of the year where we're going to put 20 or 60 of them on a plane to see New Year's twice in one evening, and then, impact them through this New Year's experience. But it all started in 2 months, literally out of a conversation at a safari picnic, and then sharing about it more. And now in real time, people are so how do we apply for Billionaire Society? And what does the fee structure work? And you're gonna do these dinners, and how's that gonna look? And I'm in my head, I'm those are probably really good questions. We should probably figure that out. But we're ideating in real time. And that's the opportunity here is you don't have to spend 6 months, a year incubating your ideas. You can just throw them out there, and someone's oh my God, that's great. I'd love to have you sponsor a dinner at Billionaire Society. That sounds cool. And then just trust that as you go, you'll actually get the data to give you your next action or your next decision. And so you get to use, I call it accountability structures, to have you really want to put yourself out there in the world. And, I wanted to be a writer for 8 years. And it wasn't until Forbes reached out to me with no blogging experience, by the way. I can't even spell. My grammar is terrible, or at least was. It took me 9 hours.
Forbes, though. Might as well.
Yeah, you might as well. I was like trying to start a blog for years, and that was, life would get in the way. And then they were like, oh, can you do 5 posts a month? And I was like, sure. And I'm like outside of the hot springs in Iceland on a portable Wi-Fi device, like hitting send on my first piece. But it forced me 5 posts a month. For someone that can't write, I was spending like 10 hours a week on a post, like just trying to do it. And now I've gotten to become a writer, but that all happened because the accountability structure was big enough for me to say yes to my greatness. So if there's something that you want to get out of you, share about it. Word creates your world. Consider you're responsible for all of it, and create a game and an accountability structure that's big enough for you to actually want to play and show up. Because otherwise you're just going to keep letting yourself off the hook like you've done so far. And just have fun with it. It's not about where you end up, but really, once again, the enjoyment in the process. So
I love it. Some very powerful practices. That's something that I've also been putting out there, like live a life worth journaling. Like take it from your mind, through your hand, pen and paper, create it into this world, write these things down, say them and speak them, and create them and put them out rather than just keep them internally in your mind, like these ideas. But
totally.
You touched on something there of just kind of just putting it out there and going with it. Do you feel it's more powerful to keep things almost in that winging it mode where you're kind of like keeping that excitement going rather than over calculation? Like, does over calculation take away from flow or take away from that excitement, do you find?
Yeah. So I call this process rapid visioning. The idea behind it is you throw a dart, you get feedback from your environment, and then you get more information. You throw a dart, you get feedback, and you kind of repeat the process. And I find like it's definitely not just like throw yourself off the deep end into like, some thing that you have completely no experience in and it's going to be completely harmful. But I find so much of us, like, we actually have everything we need inside of us, and the gap of where you think you need to be versus where it actually is, like those ratios are usually so off. And so I find there's something about being in this process, like throwing a dart out there and just like getting feedback. Maybe you've got an idea that you want to, start this cool side project, and you put a post up on Facebook and you're like, hey, I want to like impact some, great performers from Costa Rica and, rent a space for 3 weeks. Is anyone interested? Rather than like starting a whole business, finding a retreat center, getting all these logistics, et cetera, et cetera. Next thing you know, you've spent 3 months just to find out no one's interested about it. So even just like thinking about like what is common sense a lot of times, is usually just to take one easy step, and then from there, see if people are interested. And then if they are, then take another step. Maybe then you start to look at pricing, and then you take another step, and maybe you start to look at enrolling people who said, yeah, that pricing sounds good. And the next thing you know, it's like our first Unconventional Life event. Started from me out of a dream, no experience, and like followed the steps. And then in 7 weeks, we sold out our first event in Bali 2 years ago. And now we've been ranked by Inc. as the top event for artists and entrepreneurs to attend this year in 2018. But literally from like
keeping it in the moment.
Keeping it in the moment. And we still haven't spent $0 on marketing. And I don't think we ever will. I hope we never do, because it's all word of mouth. It's all just people being lit up by it. So yeah, so I love that.
I think that's a motivation killer too. When you start making too many plans too far down the line, it gets that weight and you're daunted by it. You're like, oh, this has stepped outside of my excitement zone. And now I'm intimidated by my own success of this project because I got to do all this work now. And
totally.
Within that, I love it, that moment excitement. So you've mentioned this Billionaires Club a few times. I gotta hear more about this, because this is so this is so intriguing. So I'm curious, what's your greatest fascination with people of incredible wealth?
Yeah. So I started asking myself the question, how do I make the most impact? And the truth is if you want to make the most impact, follow where the most amount of money is. And so I said, okay, well, if I want to look at where the most amount of money is, one of my zones of genius is I'm really great at actually just seeing people and being with people, like creating a space for like the mask you wear in the world to kind of come off and to just literally show up and connect, like being to being, human to human kind of level. So the idea for that started around impact. And I was like, imagine these billionaires, they get seen, there's this stigma of who they are. There's always this entourage around or whatever. Like no one actually humanizes these people, right? They're like this glorified, objectified, whatever.
The 1% everyone keeps talking about.
Yeah, right? And so I'm like, what would it be like to put them all in a room together and create a space where their mask got to drop off, where they got to just be seen as Joe or as Dan, or we're doing a lot of work in Asia, but I mean, so there's not such American or Canadian names, but, like to actually have that space. And so the commitment started there. And then I met two women in Bulgaria who have a company called Timescape. They're charging like 120 grand a ticket to have you see New Year's twice in one evening, starting in Sydney, Australia, Hong Kong, and then ending up in Hawaii. And I was like telling them about these dinners. They're like, why don't you partner with us, be on the plane for free, and host these dinners and do a music performance to open people's hearts up? And I was like, exactly. And then I was like, well, why don't you actually sponsor some dinners? And then they're sponsoring the dinners and filling their clientele of their billionaires for us to sponsor. And so it just all kind of circularly, worked back together. And it's such a win-win partnership because the desire of impact is so strong. But it's ultimately like even people like them that are hosting these, it's having them think deeper about people and humanity. And for me, like the money part, I don't really give a shit about the money so much, but I will say there's value in money, and there is nothing to be shameful about wanting money. There's nothing to be shameful about making money, about celebrating money. It does not mean that you are like out of touch and like all these other things are important, but it's a necessary vehicle to make massive impact on a large scale. And so for me now being in this conversation, it's really like, how can I empower the lightest on so that they can really step in and impact? And so yeah, we've got these dinners coming up, and we're going to see how they go. And we've also got this amazing experience. And then what's great is we've also had a lot of amazing people be like, wow, talk to them, or like, wow, those people would be great. And next thing you know, I'm like now in a conversation of $1 billion network, and just by virtue of a South African picnic. And
putting it out there and
putting it out there. And what's interesting about that though is I find that started the moment I said yes to launching our next Unconventional Life event in Bali at the end of the year. And what I found is every time I host one of our Unconventional Life, like 5-day life and business accelerators, for those that aren't familiar with them, like who I become in the process, like the transformation that I undergo and what comes through me, so that by the time we're there, what becomes possible for those attending, like skyrockets. And out of all the events, I've never felt this amount of energy coming through me, this amount of reality creation happening so fast. Like the event hasn't even started yet. And I'm like, this shit is going down right now. Like, I don't even know. By the time November happens, by the time we're at the event, like, I'm like, watch out everyone, like strap in, because if you really want to make some stuff happen in your life, like, this container is fierce. And so noticing all of the subtleties in that and that. So
I love it. This is so exciting. This is so incredible. And we'll talk a bit more about Unconventional Life Bali, but I'm still curious. I'm still on the billionaire train here. Yeah. This is a thing. Because because we do put people of incredible wealth on a bit of a pedestal, like a celebrity. And we do assume that they've got life figured out because they've got this wealth, or we assume that they're happier than the rest of society. I'm curious what your thoughts are on wealth in relation to happiness. The more that you've dealt with some of these people, do you feel like they're winging it like the rest of us, or are they more calculated, or have they just had some luck? Like I'm curious to hear more. Very fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that's been important for me is I am definitely in the business of giving more people permission to explore themselves. And I think that's really been it with the Billionaire Society as well, and these billionaires. And I think more than anything, it's I find that the more top performers and achievers I see, even on Unconventional Life, we get, these former NBA players or Olympian athletes or high profile social media influencers, at that level, a lot of times, including myself, I've experienced this, it can be so lonely. It can be gut-wrenchingly lonely. It's especially when you master the money game, because for a lot of us, the money game takes up so much of our time and our mental thought process that there's just always being on the money game. But once the money game's handled, which is I think another just fundamental expression of survival needs, then what game do you play? Do you play you make the more money game, which is great for a while, but then when you kind of have that one handled and you're more money is great, it's just kind of going to the bank account, it loses the hit of adrenaline. And I think these people, they obviously still chase that hit, which is why I think a lot of them make a lot of money, but a lot of them are really missing connection, starving for connection. And I don't think you have to be a billionaire to be starving for connection. I think a lot of you listening to this might be starving for connection. We live in the most connected society, yet the most underconnected society. Many of us are starving for connection, including myself at points, where it's just you can be in a room full of people and everyone can think the world of you or not. Yet inside you feel like either a complete imposter or you're just completely not fulfilled or satisfied. And I find that, okay, if it's not money, that's the end goal, that's going to produce like the joy or the hit of fulfillment, then what is it? And I think it really does come in being seen by other people. It's having a community. It's having people that you can share yourself with, that you can express yourself to, which is why I love Momentom Collective, which is why I love Unconventional Life, that actually just get you. You know, people that you don't have to explain yourself to, people that genuinely just get the essence of who you are without it being a thing. And so I think billionaires are no different in that regard. And I think it's such a common human experience. And money is just another piece, you know, where for some of those that are hearing this, maybe you master the artist game and you become the most epic artist at your craft that you can. And yet you're still like, I hit the top. I thought it was going to feel this way. And then it just doesn't. And I know I've done that in business too. And so, I think it's all common principle.
Yeah, I think finding that level playing field is so important. I think that's something we strive for with Momentom Collective, is to have people being both the student and the teacher in the same level, so that there's not one guru and a bunch of followers. It's kind of like everyone's learning and teaching at the same time. And I witnessed the same thing at Unconventional Life in Nicaragua last year. You know, you weren't sure if you're sitting next to an aspiring entrepreneur or someone that does have a 6 or 7 figure business. Everyone's still in these classes teaching each other and kind of on that same level. And then there's that connection that happens, that authenticness of, hey, we're just showing up as people. We're not showing up with the label of having this money or having this success or having this business or this artistic side. We're just all showing up to share these ideas and just realize that we are on the same level. We're just humans.
Yeah.
And going through this thing called life, you know, it's all part of it. So let's talk a bit about Unconventional Life Bali. So November 29th to December 3rd, correct?
Yeah, November 29th to December 3rd, 5-day life and business accelerator. And, you know, this really just is an event. So one of the things is I actually speak to every person that comes. So we have an application process, and to talk to every person that comes is ridiculous. Let me tell you, like, my team thinks I am bonkers, yet it is the essential lifeblood of why this works so well, is that what ends up happening at these events is like really deep, like cellular level kind of transformation. It's like who you are coming in, who you are after, like a deep rewiring. It's why like 70% of our attendees come back, why 100% of people would recommend the event to a friend. Like, it is way more than life and business acceleration. And it's also why some people will come and literally, you know, the one guy like made 5 figures before the event even ended, just through one conversation. You know, another woman in South Africa, like, couldn't sell out her program, and within 2 days sells it out. And then like another guy's like business doubles 25% over 6 months and has the highest revenue year that he's had in like 6 years. And so it's like why big types of breakthroughs can happen very quickly is when you get down to the cellular root, that stuff happens. And in addition to that, we're also going to be staying in these like luxury villas on the beach. I have a high value in really sustainability and integrity, energetic integrity all the way through. So it's like a Korean architecture couple, first to bring luxury solar panels and sustainability into the resort. We'll have cacao. We'll have, because why would you not have cacao? We'll have breathwork. We'll have fire performers. I'll be performing as well. We'll have musicians. We'll have dance parties, costume parties, and also ways to really integrate and actually be with Balinese culture and see some temples and do these different things. And so over the 5 days, it's really an explosion of life, business, and fun, and a meeting of, you know, we've had people from over 75 different countries. It's like people that would not ordinarily ever come across each other in life end up being in this space for 5 days. And you don't know who the who's who is, but everyone's up to something big. And more than anything, you don't just walk away with, you know, networking or contacts, but you walk away with like homies, like best friends, people that got your back, whether it's going to help you today or a few months from now or a few years from now. And every time I watch like people from Unconventional Life posting on Facebook, you know, who comments and all this stuff, it's other unconventional lifers. It's like the tribe is like fierce. The unconventional lifers have got your back. It's like the events are just the gateway into like our global community. You know, there's all these like meetups that happen, cross collaborations that happen. And so it's so just divining. So it's, unconventionallifeshow.com/Bali. I'm sure we could put the link somewhere. You can check it out. And, you know, especially like the Momentom, like we have so much, I think, complementariness between our two initiatives in the world. And so if you're hearing this, like, just write Momentom in the application and our team will watch out for it, because we get so many applications and we always sell out. And it's not about how fast we can fill it, but how can we fill it with the right people? And how can we really share the love with artists, the creatives? Like, how do we bring all the backgrounds, Like, I don't want it to ever be too heavy in one domain, or there's only too many teachers or not so many, students or whatever. It's really this merging. So that'll be happening just after the Momentum Collective wraps up your Bali chapters.
Yeah, it's so cool to have them both kind of back to back, so people can come learn the circus flow arts and do the momentum thing, and drop into UL as well. And I can't speak higher of the unconventional life experience that I had as well. I just got to tell people, make sure that you've got a good few days to process everything after, because there's definitely a decompression of, wow, what just happened? I need to render everything that I've just experienced from that, because it comes in quick and it comes in hot, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's like quantum acceleration. And coming back to our conversation earlier, like in that acceleration that happens, there's always stuff that gets brought to the surface to look at. So
it makes to receive it. No resistance. Just be open. Be a channel.
Yeah, totally. And know that you are in paradise with a bunch of new best friends in the process. So
I love it. I've got a couple more questions before we close. I've got a question from Gab, and this is just a brilliant question, and it's, what important truths do few people agree with you on? Do you have some things that you see as an important truth, but you feel it's a bit it can be tested with other people? They sometimes don't always agree with you.
Yeah, Gab, what a question. I don't think I've ever been asked this question, at least on air before. So let me think about it. So if I would say important truth is, I really believe in the nature of just being in the pit. And I have some friends that really, they're like, that's just a belief structure. Like, you're just creating your reality that there's like the pit, right? Like, you could just actually, what I mean by the pit is like deep rock bottom experiences that, like, when I look at my life, there's been as many highs, there have been just as many lows correlated, that ultimately I think the low in the pit, you get gutted so that you literally can launch even higher. It's like if you're trying to do like a long jump, you literally got to like go backwards just to get enough momentum to come back up. And I really value my pit experiences. Like, if I didn't, maybe I wouldn't have so many of them show up in my experience. But I find that there's a lot of friends that are like, you get to say how life is, and you can just manifest this and manifest that. And I like grit. I like realness. I like rawness. And I like to feel my humanity. I think grief, I think sadness, I think joy, I think it is all on the spectrum. And I don't want to have a limited range of expression and emotion. And so I find, especially as you do work on yourself, it's like positive thoughts, do that one. It's like affirmations, do that. Surround yourself with the right people, do that. Self-care routine, do that. And it's just always in this positive trending direction. Yet all the other stuff that happens, the human experience underneath, doesn't really get as much glorification or airtime or value or importance. And for me personally, I spend a lot of my time there. And it's not like I don't have a really amazing life. Like I was just talking about the last few months, friends passing away, relationship transitioning, yet billionaire society, singing performances, like they can all coexist together. But I find that really seeing the value in that, and actually really putting explicit attention on the pit and welcoming it really exclusively as part of the process, and not just the affirmations and not just the pretty things. That's something a lot of people are I kind of would rather skip that. And I'm just you know what? I like humanity and grit, and let's just be real. Let's just meet there. And then let's also meet, at the top. So
fit for the pit. I love it.
Fit for the pit. It's really good.
We'll trademark that. Yeah. Is that some of the top advice you'd give your 20-year-old self, is to just embrace the negative as much as the positive?
I think if I were to go back to my 20-year-old self, there was a way that no matter how successful I was, I never got to actually experience any of my success. For those of you that climb mountains, I live in Colorado, the idea of false summiting, you get to the top just to realize there's another top, and then you get to that top just to realize there's another top. That was always happening for me. And just I would have a goal, and then I'd finally achieve it, and then there was another goal. And I never got to actually experience any of my greatness. It was always this, there's not enough time in the day. I feel so far behind. I'm never going to make it. I look at this other person, comparing myself, being jealous, all things that I've, definitely been a part of. And I think if I could go back in time to my 20-year-old self, I would really just say, pause, take a deep breath, relax, come back into your body. Because I lived a lot of my life in my head, and, really just be with where you're at, and just even witness yourself. Just be willing to step out of your experience and just see. And ultimately, like, it's all unfolding. It's all in order. It's all perfect.
Bring that success to the present moment and soak it up. I love it.
Exactly. So,
well, I've got a few more lightning questions here to close up with. What's your weirdest habit?
Weirdest habit. Let's see. I really enjoy working I go to CrossFit in the morning, and I love just like sitting in my CrossFit clothes. It's hot, which usually looks like a sports bra and like booty shorts. And so I'm constantly just in limited clothing while working, and I live in the mountains, so it doesn't always make sense because it's not always warm. It's not like I just live in like the tropics somewhere.
You're always ready to jump up and
I'm just always ready. Yeah. There's something about it keeps me fueled. So
love it. What's your guilty pleasure snack?
Oh, chocolate all day, like hardcore. I have many partners that are like, because of you, I now have a chocolate addiction years later after separating.
Who's one person who truly inspires you?
I would say one person that truly inspires me is my dad. He's been one of my biggest teachers and one of the hardest lessons to learn from. And at the same time, watching him be willing to do his own work is really inspiring as he gets older. And he went from Wall Street exec to ski instructor this path. So
love it. What's your favorite Saturday morning cartoon?
Ooh, I really like Hey Arnold. I don't watch it so much anymore, but
the football head guy, right?
Yeah, totally. Hey Arnold.
Okay, cool. What's your superpower?
My superpower is seeing the light in other people, or seeing someone else's gifts and then revealing it and showing it to them before they can fully see it in themselves.
Your biggest limitation?
Biggest limitation is my heart. I love so big and I care so much, and that often can come to a fault where if you are in my inner circle and I've loved you, I will just often over sacrifice myself in order to be there for you.
Powerful answer. And the last one, your favorite country?
Oh, Iceland right now. Iceland's pretty epic for many reasons. It's got all the mountain stuff. There's no people. And I get to eat bread and cheese there because the gluten and dairy is homemade and it doesn't affect my body.
Amazing. I love that Iceland's got a whole new vision of it now. It's no longer just the evil team from Mighty Ducks 2. It's got a great buzz about it.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I can't wait to keep on with your journey here and see where things go from here. Where can people follow more of your journey on Instagram?
Yeah, so you can go to @Jules Schroeder Life, JULESSCHROEDER, and then the word life, LIFE. Also, if you like podcasts, you can search Unconventional Life. It's on iTunes. We've been ranked top podcast for entrepreneurs the last few years in a row. Check us out there. We've got tons and tons of episodes. And then Jules Schroeder Music as well. You can find me on Facebook. Check out some of my music, and Unconventional Life. Come check out our events and things like that too. So
amazing. Well, I'm excited to partner up again with you sometime, and thank you so much for taking the time in your schedule to drop in with us and share some good insight, Jules.
Yeah, such a blast. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks so much, everyone.
Great. Take care.